right, we're getting closer to seeing what we're going to do in this draft, and that's going to be a big piece to this puzzle. I hear a lot of stuff. You hear a lot of stuff from me. Who knows? Football is crazy. We say things, we hear things, we believe things, and ultimately, in time, it shakes out to be what's true. I hear now that the third wide receiver is critical to the Dolphins' success and what they want to do. And I agree, but then don't agree. And there's reasons for that. Now, a third wide receiver like Odell Beckham or, somebody like Worthy or Brian Thomas Jr. in that 21 spot, that's not my flavor. But there's advantages to that. And then there's obviously disadvantages too. You have holes on your team. You try to fill them. You try to maybe raise a weakness. You maybe try to accentuate a strength, and then you see what you got. So I'm going to get into the receiving dilemma or choice or, interest that a lot of people have to kind of say what I think, what I see the advantages of that, getting a player of that position. And if we go with an Odell, say, or we go in the draft. But also I want to talk about something else because I got my own beliefs. And I believe that when an offense gets onto the field, the very first thing is not what play they call. It's about spacing, how far the guys are spaced apart or where they're spaced, and depth. The spacing and depth is the foundation of success or failure for that particular play. As an example, you could have the best run offense in the league, and you can call a run on a 3rd and 1, but if everybody's in the box and you got maybe one single high safety, then the spacing and depth is going to constrict your opportunity to have success. Conversely, if you run a play action on that play and you're able to block, then you got one guy over the top and he's got to cover the entire field. And if that tight end breaks open, it's one-on-one, really, which means it's a touchdown. And so spacing and depth is what you want to create into an advantage for whatever side of the ball you're calling. And so, some people say, well, Hill and Waddle, they get bracketed. We need a third wide receiver to break that. And, well, yes and no. But first, it's got to start with the spacing. And you can't always control spacing. There's a lot of guessing and gaming going on between that. But the more balanced your offense is, the more likely you're going to have an opportunity to take advantage of that spacing. As an example, why do you think that when it's 2nd and short, they always say they should throw on this down? Because it's 2nd and short, and if the defense decides to kind of try to stop that run because they think they're going to run on 2nd, it creates a spacing and depth issue. If you throw the football, it puts the defense in a disadvantageous situation. Now, if you look at this little graphic here I made, I'm going to add some more to this and dial it in some more. But in a regular look, 25 yards, 50 yards across, 25 deep, it's 113 yards per player for 11 players. But they're not covering the whole field. You got guys rushing, usually 4 guys rushing. So you can see here, it's 178 yards per player in a 7-man coverage. That's a lot of space to cover. And so I'm going to show you that when it comes to a blitz, how the spacing grows geometrically and how, yes, if we have a third wide receiver and we're able to block long enough and force them to blitz, it's going to put gigantic problems on any defense that wants to cover Hill, Waddle, and Odell or Worthy or whoever. And then Njoku and Mostert and A-Chain coming out of the backfield. But that's not always going to be that way. There's other things mitigating. It's a huge study. I'm not going to really get into it. So that's the really good side that you could really threaten things. I mean, if you have a fly by Hill, you have a post by whoever you get, Odell or whoever, reverse. And then on the other side, you got Waddle. You really can't run cover two. It's impossible to run cover two, really, because unless your cornerbacks are playing different, and then your cover two becomes cover four. So it would immediately restrict options of a defense, and that's great. But more goes into that. And the affecting of spacing and depth, it can happen many ways, and you could free up Hill and Waddle more than just simply getting that third wide receiver, but it will help. So I'm going to get into all that. I'm going to get back to the live on Friday, guys, 10 p.m. So come check me out. Join in, Curtis at aceperhead.com. Email me there. I'll send you the link. Come on for a little while. The whole show. I don't care. I really had a good time. A lot of good guys came on last week. I'm going to invite more on this week, and we'll keep on talking Dolphins football and just football in general. And whatever viewpoint you have, as long as you have, no, Tua sucks, okay, well, why? And if you have a reason, we can discuss that. No one's the guru. Come on, say what you got to say. Diverse opinions always creates a better evaluation. So come check me out Friday night, and all the guys that are going to be on, and everybody else in the comments who does their talking, some good stuff in the comments. Friday night at 10 p.m. I think it's Eastern Standard Time. I live in a place, my time zone goes Eastern, and then it goes UD, the next time zone over. So it's going to be around 10 p.m. Eastern Time. It might be 9 p.m. I got to check my time zone to figure out. So there you go. So anyway, guys, so I want to give thanks for the likes, subscribes, comments, views, all that stuff you do. I want to give you a shout out and a shout out to Ace Per Head, my sponsor. Go out to you. This show ain't going down. Ace Per Head's betting software is the premier white label platform for bookies to manage their players and grow their sportsbook operation. Click the link in the description below to get set up in minutes. Ask for the Curtis promo and get a special introductory discount. All right, before I get into the spacing and depth part, it's really critical to understand that the calls, it's not the call. It's the depth and the spacing, then the call and the talent and the response. And this is why audibles are so critical, because you can take advantage of that depth and spacing mismatch if it comes up. But if you can't really call audibles, then it really kind of puts you in a situation. So I'm hoping we get audibles, because then we can really take care of this stuff. But I'll get to that next. Now receivers, Odell Beckham got an offer from the Dolphins. They're serious. It's not a chump change money. I don't think that, Odell's going to wait. He can wait and get a good salary, play maybe half the season. Somebody's receiver goes down and he's waiting to get the call. So he's not going to come for chump change. The guy's super talented. I see people say he's not good. The guy's still good. He's really good. It would be unbelievable to pair him with Hill and Waddle. But what I say here, you need to protect first. Because the Dolphins last year, their blitz time to throw was equal to their clean time to throw. So when everything was going good, their time to throw was very quickest in the league by far. But then when the blitz came, it still was the same way. And that's not good, because it got in the same amount of time. So the protection was an issue. Some of that is because we throw fast and all that, but it's not all because of that. It's because it gets in fast and we couldn't pass protect. So when you get that third wide receiver in there, it will force major problems with that blitz time to throw, because you're going to it's going to be, I'll get into the numbers in a second, but you're going to see the amount of space that these defenders have to cover just by blitzing one guy is crazy. And if you got Hill, Waddle, Jonnu, and maybe Odell or Worthy, it is going to be so hard to cover. But I'm going to get into the understanding that because you're going to have these three guys, you're going to get a lot of depth, and that's going to open up the underneath. But you're also going to get spacing that's wide. And all that depth and wide spacing kind of covers the Dolphins' menu of what they like to do. And defenses usually leave that interior open. And it's there for us to take, but we can't really take it. But now, if you add Jonnu in there, short, shallow slants or outs or curls, he can take advantage of that because Waddle and Hill are going to drive things back, and then Odell's even going to add to it. So there is an element of you want at least a speed receiver in that third wide receiver spot. And the receiver is really good if you go that route, even, in the draft, conversely, over to free agency, because the free agency will help you this year. But you're not going to keep Odell next year. And you can see that Hill's starting to have some problems in the offseason. I mentioned it before. And it's going to allow you an opportunity to, hey, maybe we'll stick with Hill. Maybe we'll move Waddle and get some draft capital. We can fill things out, or move off Hill and keep Waddle. So the third wide receiver, investing big this year in the draft, while I wouldn't like it because I really want to invest in some big boy bodies inside, whether on the D-line or the offensive line, it does make sense in a lot of ways. Now, for me, what I've seen is that Waddle and Hill are smaller guys. They have a smaller catch radius. It forces Tua to be more accurate. I like Odell. He's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit of a bigger guy, not big guy, but a little bit bigger guy. But if you're going to go in the draft, I don't see a lot of Dolphin fans very happy with Brian Thomas Jr. I kind of like him. Now, it's all a crapshoot. You never know. These guys, these receivers, they can either be unbelievable or they just they don't develop. It's very hard to figure out if these guys are going to play out. A lot of people like Worthy because he's got 2.21, broke the record. But he's a small guy, 5'11", 165 or 161. That is so small. And I guess you can keep going with the Smurf receivers if you wanted to move off Hill. And I mean, that's really exciting speed. Just to think about that. Achane, Mostert, Worthy, 4-1, Hill, Waddle. You could break things open all day long, and it's very exciting stuff. But for me, one of the things we had a problem with was the red zone, and that spacing and depth issue is what I'm going to get into it. But when you're in that red zone, it constricts everything, and the speed that you got, it's good to get off, but it gets very cloudy with all bodies in the way. The defense is threatened by the depth, and so it gets harder for these guys to get their touchdowns when they're small because they can get jammed. They're a little bit small, so the windows are smaller. Big guy would really go a long way, especially when you see that Tua has the ability to throw with anticipation and throw to spots, and then it opens up, that height element. And that's why I like Brian Thomas Jr., 6'3", 209. He only had one drop last year. 4'3", 3 at 209, 38.5 vertical, 10.6 long jump, 17 receptions for touchdown. He was the seventh most depth per target, 16.8. Big guy, still developing, some injury history. I don't really like it. Nothing serious, but dings along the way. They say he's got to I got to keep going through the film, but he's got to get a little bit more physical. Sometimes he has a little problem with the physical receiver part, physical DB part on him. But for me, I think we need to sign Waddle long term. You need a complementary receiver, and a big guy would offer diversity. We're all finesse. We're all into the small receivers. We're all into the smaller kind of fast edge guys. Well, most of us a little bit bigger, but we got to have some diversity. And I think that Waddle long-term with that speed and then a taller receiver with speed would really be a little bit more difficult for defense to stop and would give different opportunities, different tools in the toolkit to attack secondaries. So I like him. I mean, Harrison Jr., Neighbors, and Dunzy, Rome, Dunzy, I can bear with. Those guys all gone early. You got Adonai Mitchell, Worthy, and Brian Thomas kind of floating in that 20 spot. I really like Thomas at this point because of that. I don't know. It's too small, 165. Remember last year, you saw a Hill when he got jammed into the ground, and then you need run blockers. Thomas Jr., he's not a great run blocker yet, but at that size, it's going to help you a ton. And McDaniel wants receivers who can block. Now, I saw Hill do some good stuff. I even saw Waddle do some really nice things with his run blocking. But at 165, what can you really do? It really, I don't know. To me, Worthy is just a little limiting. I know there's the flash there, and it will create that depth you want to work underneath. And he is kind of like maybe a replacement for, say, a Hill in style with the speed and the explosion to pair with. You can keep that kind of that look that you're trying to develop going. I understand that, but for me personally, Thomas Jr. would be the guy at this stage, although, I would go a different direction. So you saw my graphic before, and it's 113 yards per player, 178 yards per player when you got to cover 7. But now, notice what happens is when you just shave off 5 yards, okay, and you got 20-yard box, and this is what happens in the red zone. So you're going from 113 yards per player down to 90 yards per player, and then you're moving from 178 yards to 142 with 7 guys in coverage. That's almost a 40-yard dash. And this is one of the reasons why it gets harder and harder to score in the red zone. And it's part of the reason why you want the balance to be able to run inside to get that threat. And then it kind of opens things up. And it's also why the bigger receivers, the tight ends, who can muscle and use the vertical part of the field, Hill and Waddle, they're using the horizontal. But when you got bigger guys, they can use the vertical, and it opens up a space to make it a little bit easier to get that touchdown. And so the red zone is very difficult. We struggled in the red zone a ton. Not a ton for most teams, but for what we wanted to do. And it's something we've got to grow in. I do believe the interior run game, but then if you just want to throw that football, you got to get some guys that can use that vertical space. Now, if you go back to the look that we had before, you can see it's 100, or this graphic here, 166 yards per player. With that, when you got 6 guys in coverage and 1 blitzer, okay? And that's a lot for 6 guys to cover 166 yards per player. And that's why if you do have this 3 wide receiver set, Hill, Waddle, and whoever else, OBJ, Worthy, and a blitz, it's going to put 6 guys on 3, and they're going to cover a ton of space. The safety's going to play over, probably in a cover 3. And so it's going to open a lot of stuff. Thing is, can you get that ball out quick enough? Because the leverage that the defense plays along with the spacing and the depth is critical. Leverage is another thing that before you can get into the actual play called, you have to talk about what's the leverage they're giving you along with the spacing and depth. And then you can kind of get into the particulars of the play. So then if you take it to another level, so when you got, say, 25 yards, now say you're just outside that red zone or just slightly in that red zone, and you got guys that are concerned all the way up there, giving you the cushion up to 25 yards, and they blitz a guy, it's 208 yards per player to cover. And if you have a Jonnu Smith, a Hill, a Waddle, and a third wide receiver, this is extraordinarily difficult to cover. And I can see why that, fans are excited about this, and so is McDaniel and probably Greer. But when you understand that the goal is to create an environment for the play that is conducive to what you want to do, it doesn't always mean that you've got to just up the notch, say, on a receiving talent. When you run inside, or you have a guy that can threaten in that slant or in a skinny post over the middle, it creates a spacing where guys crunch inside and they crunch up. And once they crunch inside and up, then it opens up the edges, the post, and then the deep sideline. And so, we can get that third wide receiver, and that's going to help with the bracketing and all this, but it's going to really set spacing. But it's going to create a spacing of depth and peripheral, and it's going to open the inside. If we can take advantage of that with our offensive front and get some runs where you get a first down run on 4 and 5, where you can get into a second and short, then it's going to be what everybody dreams. But if we don't create that threat inside, they'll stay in that deep and wide spacing, and we're still going to have success with that third wide receiver, but it's not going to be the conducive environment that we want, and it's going to create a little bit of inconsistency, because if the defense says, I can rush 4, stop the inside run, and I'll get enough pressure, and I can drop 7 guys in the coverage, you're looking at the difference here, and this is why blitzing is so important. You got 208 yards versus 113. You've almost cut the space in half. And, not fully in half, but it drops dramatically and makes it less space and easier. And then the windows shrink and Tua has to hold the ball longer. And then that lets the pressure have a little bit more time. And that's where you get the problems. So I like the third wide receiver spot. You could grab maybe a guy in the second round to help. We don't need to be the 90s Dallas Cowboys with this talent that we have here. But we need some kind of threat. We need some kind of balance, because we have this strength and we have this weakness. There's 2 philosophies. Raise the weakness and then your strength will raise as a byproduct, or you just leave your weakness where it is and then you raise your strength even more, and you're hoping that raises your weakness. There's no clear answer. I think Greer and the Dolphins are going to go for this third wide receiver if there's the right ones available. And there's a lot of good reasons for it. I just don't know how it's going to play out, and I don't know if it's going to play out the way people think. Although it definitely will help. So anyway, guys, I like Brian Thomas so far right now. I like Brockers even more. But we're going to go third wide receiver. And I think maybe there is a sense of, hey, Waddle's getting a huge contract. Hill's going to have to move on one way or the other soon. And I do think there's going to be very exciting. I just don't know if that's going to be enough to carry us. But there's other things that can happen inside, free agents and stuff like that. I would love to see the raising of the talent that we got, the huge asset, and then maybe some other way we raise that weakness, and then we'd be almost unbeatable. But that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Go to St. Catch you next time. Be well. Go Fins. Start building your own online sports book today by getting signed up with acebread.com service that'll allow you to book action on sports from all around the world.